Hey guys, tonight we delve into the delightfully peculiar world of medieval dating. Imagine yourself in a time before swiping right, where finding a soulmate might involve a fair bit of animal husbandry, a questionable dance move, or perhaps even a strategically placed wart. You probably won't survive this journey unscathed, but at least you'll emerge with a newfound appreciation for modern matchmaking. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported back to a bustling medieval town, a cacophony of sounds and smells assaulting your modern senses. One of the first things you might notice, beyond the rather unfortunate sewage situation, is the distinct lack of minty fresh breath. Oral hygiene, as you know it, was practically non-existent. So, if you were trying to woo someone, you'd be dealing with breath that could, quite literally, knock a knight off his horse. People chewed on herbs like parsley or fennel seeds, not for dazzling freshness, but to mask the truly horrific odours emanating from their mouths. Imagine trying to whisper sweet nothings with that going on. It certainly puts a damper on any romantic inclinations, doesn't it? But beyond the pungent breath, a more mystical approach to attracting a mate was widespread. Love potions. Forget the subtle art of conversation. Here, you might be offered a brew made from rather questionable ingredients. We're talking about concoctions that often included animal blood, herbs gathered under a specific moon, or even, charmingly, snippets of a person's hair or nail clippings. The idea was that by consuming a part of the desired person, or a magical mixture intended to influence them, you could compel their affection. Historians still argue whether these potions were ever genuinely believed to work, or if they were simply a desperate measure born of superstition and a lack of other romantic avenues. Perhaps it was less about actual magic and more about the placebo effect, or maybe just a convenient excuse when things didn't quite work out. Oh, the potion must have been faulty, not my personality. Consider the sheer ingenuity, or perhaps desperation, involved. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval medicine and folklore were deeply intertwined, and this extended to matters of the heart. Diseases were often attributed to imbalances or evil spirits, and remedies were a blend of practical knowledge and magical thinking. Love, being such an unpredictable and powerful force, naturally fell under this mystical umbrella. You might stumble upon a village elder known for their expertise in these matters, someone who could whip up a love philter for a small fee and a wink. It was a thriving, if unregulated, market. A quirky tidbit you might find amusing is the belief that wearing certain stones or carrying specific animal parts could also attract love. A piece of magnet stone, for instance, was thought to draw love towards you, much like it drew metal. And if that didn't work, well, there was always the option of trying to get your beloved to accidentally step over a dead animal that had been magically prepared. Yes, really. It sounds less like romance and more like a bizarre obstacle course. But when your dating app is just a dusty village square and gossip, you make do with what you have. So, as you navigate this fragrant and slightly unnerving landscape of medieval courtship, you begin to appreciate that while the intentions were the same, finding a partner the methods were uniquely medieval. No wonder marriages were often arranged. It probably saved a lot of people from accidentally drinking something unsavory. As you reel from the thought of trying to woo someone with a mouthful of, well, let's not dwell on it, your gaze shifts to a more visually striking aspect of medieval courtship, the bridal veil. You see a young woman, perhaps on her way to a betrothal ceremony, her face partially obscured by a sheer, flowing piece of fabric. Today, we associate veils with purity and tradition, a graceful accessory for a bride. But in the Middle Ages, their symbolism ran far deeper and, frankly, a little more pragmatically. A mainstream historical fact is that veils were initially worn by brides as a symbolic protection against evil spirits. Yes, really. It wasn't just about modesty, It was about warding off malevolent forces that might wish to corrupt the union, or even worse, steal away the bride's fertility. Imagine walking down the aisle, or rather, the muddy path to the church, knowing that this flimsy piece of fabric was your primary defense against unseen entities trying to meddle with your future family. It adds a certain weight to the accessory, doesn't it? It wasn't merely fashion, it was spiritual armor. This ties into some of the more bizarre fertility customs of the era. If you thought love potions were odd, wait until you hear about some of the rituals intended to ensure a fruitful marriage. For example, in some regions, a fertility charm might involve a bride stepping over a fish or even a plough to symbolize the breaking of barrenness and the promise of a bountiful harvest of children. It sounds less like romance and more like an agricultural lesson. Another quirky tidbit is the practice of throwing grain or rice at the newlyweds, a custom that persists in altered forms even today. This wasn't just celebratory confetti. Each grain represented a wish for many children, a shower of potential offspring raining down upon the happy couple. The more grain, the more babies, supposedly. You can almost hear the excited whispers of more barley, more babies, as the new couple emerged. Historians still argue whether these specific rituals were universal or localized superstitions. While some practices, like the grain throwing, became widespread, others might have been confined to smaller communities, passed down through generations of oral tradition, their origins murky even to those who performed them. Were they truly believed, or simply acts of hope and community solidarity? It's hard to say definitively. Beyond the veil and the grains, you might encounter other, less delicate fertility practices. Imagine a young couple being given a cake made with ingredients thought to promote fertility, perhaps something with an unappetizing amount of animal fat or certain herbs. Or consider the rather direct approach of presenting the bride with a spindle and distaff, symbols of womanly duties and, by extension, the ability to produce children and manage a household. It's less subtle than a hint. It's practically a neon sign screaming, "Make babies." The pressure to procreate was immense. In a time of high infant mortality rates and an economy reliant on manual labor, children were not just a blessing, but an economic necessity. A marriage that failed to produce offspring was often seen as a failure of the union itself, and sometimes even a sign of divine displeasure. So, while modern couples might stress about finding the right caterer or seating arrangements, medieval couples were likely more concerned with ensuring their lineage continued. They had quite a bit riding on that veil and that handful of grain, didn't they? And let's not forget the wedding feast itself, which often contained elements designed to boost fertility. Certain foods, specific toasts, and even the seating arrangements could be imbued with magical significance, all aimed at the singular goal of ensuring a prolific family. It makes your modern wedding cake seem rather mundane by comparison. No pressure, just the entire future of your family resting on whether you ate enough of that symbolic, slightly dodgy-looking pastry. So, as the sounds of the bustling town fade into the background, you ponder the complex web of beliefs, fears, and desperate hopes that surrounded medieval marriage. It was a union blessed by God, but also one constantly assailed by unseen forces and physical frailties, making every step, every ritual, a plea to destiny for a fruitful future. Having navigated the rather intense world of veiled brides and fertility rites, you now stumble upon a practice that might make modern online dating seem positively intimate: betrothal by proxy. Imagine getting engaged to someone you've never even met, a person who exists only as a name and a set of familial connections. This wasn't some niche oddity. It was a deeply ingrained aspect of medieval aristocratic and royal marriage, a strategic maneuver of power and alliance. It's widely understood that marriage among the elite in the Middle Ages was less about romantic love and more about political and economic advantage. Daughters were often seen as valuable commodities, their hands offered to secure alliances, expand territories, or solidify dynastic claims. A proxy marriage meant that a stand-in, typically a trusted envoy or a high-ranking noble, would represent one of the parties during the betrothal ceremony. You might witness a solemn event where a proxy, perhaps an elderly duke, places a ring on the finger of a young princess, all in the name of a future husband hundreds of miles away. It certainly takes the meet-cute out of the equation, doesn't it? No awkward first dates, no fumbled compliments, just a formal representative standing in for all the romantic possibilities. A peculiar detail often noted is how the proxy sometimes even performed symbolic acts of intimacy on behalf of the absent party. This could include placing a leg in the bed of the betrothed, or, in some truly bizarre instances, even touching their bare leg, all to signify the eventual consummation of the marriage. It's a concept that sounds straight out of a bizarre reality television show, but for them, it was a perfectly legitimate, if a tad uncomfortable, legal formality. Can you imagine explaining that to your friends? Oh yes, my husband's uncle's second cousin once removed placed his foot in my bed to signify our union. It certainly adds a layer of formal detachment to an already distant relationship. Scholars continually debate the psychological impact of such unions. How did individuals, particularly women, feel about being wedded to a stranger through an intermediary? Was there a sense of duty overriding personal feelings? Or did some harbour secret resentments? The evidence is scarce and often filtered through biased lenses, making it difficult to truly grasp the emotional landscape of these arranged marriages. Yet, it's clear that for many, personal preference was a luxury they simply couldn't afford. You might observe the quiet resignation on the faces of the betrothed, especially the women. Their future was decided not by their hearts, but by maps, treaties, and the ambitions of their fathers and brothers. The proxy, while a stand-in for the groom, was also a tangible representation of this lack of personal agency. He was the physical embodiment of a future already charted, a life already planned without their input. This system, while seemingly cold and calculating, did offer a certain stability. It forged bonds between powerful families, reducing the likelihood of conflict and ensuring the continuation of noble lines. It was a practical solution to geopolitical challenges, even if it came at the cost of individual romantic freedom. The idea of love was, for many, something that might develop after marriage, a fortunate bonus rather than a prerequisite. So, as you watch the proxy bow and the rings exchanged, you realize that for many medieval couples, the journey to I do was less about personal connection and more about strategic alliances, brokered and formalized in ways that would make your head spin. From the cold formality of proxy marriages, you step into a far more intriguing and surprisingly flexible arrangement: hand-fasting ceremonies. Unlike the lifelong, unbreakable vows of a traditional church wedding, hand-fasting offered a temporary, trial marriage, a sort of medieval test drive for couples. It's an aspect of medieval relationships that truly challenges the common perception of strict, unyielding societal norms. This temporary union, often lasting a year and a day, was solidified by the couple literally joining hands, a symbolic binding of their intentions without the full religious sacrament or legal permanence of a formal wedding. It's often recognized that hand-fasting was a widespread practice, particularly in parts of Northern Europe, allowing couples to assess compatibility and even conceive children before committing to a permanent bond. Imagine the pressure: a year to figure out if you could tolerate each other's snoring, shared living habits, and perhaps crucially, if you were fertile. It was a pragmatic approach in a time when divorce was almost impossible and having heirs was paramount. A fascinating detail about hand-fasting is that any children conceived during this trial period were considered legitimate, regardless of whether the couple ultimately chose to formalize their union with a church wedding. This provision highlights the practical, community-oriented mindset of the era, prioritizing the status of children over rigid adherence to religious dogma regarding marriage formalities. It's a rather progressive concept when you think about it, especially compared to some of the stricter interpretations of marriage that emerged later. You can almost hear the village gossips placing bets on whether young Thomas and Ilara would make it past the year and a day mark. There's ongoing academic discussion about the true prevalence and exact legal standing of hand-fasting across different regions and social classes. While it was certainly recognised, its exact enforcement and the social implications of a couple choosing not to proceed after the hand-fasting period varied. Were they ostracised? Did they simply go their separate ways with a shrug? The answers aren't always clear, depending on the specific local customs and the individuals involved. You might envision a hand-fasting taking place outdoors, perhaps near a standing stone or a particularly ancient tree, away from the stern gaze of the local priest. The community would gather not for a grand feast, but for a simple, heartfelt ceremony where two people clasp hands, declaring their intention to try out life together. There would be no fancy rings, no elaborate gowns, just the binding of hands and a spoken agreement. It feels much more organic and less theatrical than the proxy marriage, doesn't it? More about the people, less about the politics. If, after the allotted time, the couple decided they were a match, they would then proceed with a formal church wedding, solidifying their bond for life. If not, they could part ways, free to seek other partners without the shame or legal entanglements of a broken marriage. It offered a vital escape valve in a society where personal choice in matters of the heart was often limited. For someone navigating the tumultuous waters of medieval courtship, the option of a hand-fasting might have felt like a breath of fresh air, a small window of agency in a world largely dictated by tradition and familial duty. It truly was a unique blend of formal, custom, and practical flexibility. Having considered the flexibility of hand-fasting, your journey through medieval dating now takes a turn towards something even more peculiar to modern sensibilities: bundling. Imagine, if you will, sharing a bed with a potential suitor, not for intimacy, but for the precise opposite. This was a common, if regionally varied, courtship custom, particularly in rural communities, designed to allow young couples to spend time together in private, without the risk of, well, getting too private. It's a well-documented historical phenomenon that bundling allowed unmarried couples to share a bed, but with strict precautions in place to prevent sexual contact. These precautions could range from a literal bundling board placed down the middle of the bed, acting as a physical barrier, to the couple being sewn into separate sacks, or even being wrapped tightly in blankets. Think of it as a medieval chastity sleepover, a rather elaborate and uncomfortable way to get to know someone without the watchful eyes of the entire household. You might picture a young man, nervous but hopeful, being tucked into a bed next to his intended, both of them encased like caterpillars, under the watchful, if sometimes feigned, sleep of their parents in the next room. It sounds utterly bizarre, doesn't it? A bit like trying to eat soup with a fork. A particularly quirky detail is the sheer ingenuity behind some of these barriers. Beyond the wooden board, some accounts mention the woman having her petticoats sewn tightly around her ankles, or even both parties being required to wear multiple layers of clothing, making any illicit contact virtually impossible without an acrobatic feat. It wasn't about trust. It was about making temptation physically inconvenient. You can almost hear the sigh of frustration from a young suitor trying to subtly shift his position only to be met with a solid wooden plank. Scholars continue to debate the effectiveness of bundling and its moral implications. While proponents argued it was a virtuous way for couples to converse and bond, allowing for emotional connection without physical temptation, critics, particularly from more conservative religious factions, viewed it as an invitation to sin. Was it truly as innocent as claimed? Or were there often accidents that led to shotgun weddings? The truth likely varied greatly from one household to another, depending on the strictness of the parents and, perhaps, the sheer willpower of the bundled couple. You can almost feel the awkward tension in the room. Imagine the hushed conversations in the dark, the polite inquiries about family, crops, and perhaps, with a nervous laugh, the discomfort of the bundling board. This wasn't about passionate embraces. It was about talking for hours, learning each other's voices, their mannerisms, their thoughts. In a time when privacy was a luxury and chaperones were ubiquitous, bundling offered a unique, if constrained, opportunity for genuine conversation and emotional intimacy. It was a chance to truly gauge a person's character without the distractions of a public setting. So, while your modern mind might recoil at the idea of such a bizarre sleep arrangement, for many medieval couples, bundling was a practical, albeit peculiar, step on the path to marriage. It was a testament to the era's blend of strict social codes and surprisingly inventive ways to circumvent them, all in the name of finding a suitable partner without scandal. It certainly makes dating apps seem like a walk in the park, doesn't it? At least you don't have to worry about a literal wooden board separating you from your potential next date. Leaving the peculiar intimacy of bundling behind, you now step into the more refined, yet equally intriguing, world of love letters and courtship via correspondence. While not everyone in the Middle Ages was literate, for those who were, especially within the noble and burgeoning merchant classes, written communication offered a discreet and often highly stylized avenue for romantic pursuit. This wasn't just about passing notes, it was an art form. It's a widely accepted notion that love letters served as crucial tools for courtship, particularly when distance or social propriety prevented frequent face-to-face meetings. Imagine a knight on campaign, separated from his lady by vast distances, pouring his heart onto parchment. Or a noblewoman, confined to her chambers, receiving a beautifully penned missive filled with florid declarations. These letters were often carefully crafted, drawing upon the conventions of courtly love, an idealized and often unrequited form of affection that valorized the lady and positioned the suitor as her humble, devoted servant. It certainly beat shouting your affections across a crowded market square, didn't it? It allowed for a more controlled, almost performative expression of emotion. A peculiar facet of these letters was the heavy reliance on poetic language, metaphors, and allegories. You wouldn't find a straightforward, "Do you like me? Check yes or no here." Instead, a suitor might describe his beloved as a rose among thorns, or lament his suffering from Cupid's arrow, begging for a single glance to alleviate his torment. Sometimes, these letters weren't even written by the suitor themselves. A scribe or a learned friend might be employed to ensure the language was sufficiently eloquent and adhered to the proper romantic conventions. Imagine hiring someone to write your dating app messages today. It's basically the same concept, just with quills and parchment. There is continued scholarly discussion about the true sincerity behind many of these highly stylized letters. Were they genuine expressions of deep emotion, or merely performative exercises, following established literary traditions? While some undoubtedly conveyed true affection, others might have been more about demonstrating the writer's wit, education, and adherence to courtly ideals, which could itself be attractive to a discerning recipient. The line between genuine feeling and poetic posturing was often blurred. You might envision a scene where a lady in waiting, with a conspiratorial glance, slips a rolled-up scroll into the hand of her mistress. The recipient would then retreat to a private corner, perhaps by a window letting in the dim light, to carefully unroll the parchment. Each word would be savoured, each phrase analysed for hidden meanings or veiled intentions. The tactile experience alone, the feel of the paper, the scent of the wax seal, the careful script, added layers of romance that a quickly typed message simply cannot replicate. These letters weren't just about professing love, they were also a way to build a connection, to learn about a person's mind and character without the immediate pressure of physical presence. They allowed for a certain fantasy, a projection of idealized qualities onto the distant beloved. In a world where direct communication was often limited by social status, chaperones, and travel, the humble love letter was a powerful bridge, capable of traversing both physical and social divides, all while maintaining an air of romantic mystique. It certainly makes you think twice about the casual hay of modern communication. From the carefully chosen words of distant love letters, you now find yourself at a dining table, perhaps in a modest peasant cottage or a bustling inn, observing a custom that is as endearing as it is utterly baffling. Spoon dating rituals. Forget candlelight and whispered secrets. Here, the sharing of a single eating utensil could speak volumes about budding affection. It's a rather charming, if archaic, practice that the sharing of a spoon during a meal could signal romantic interest or a deepening connection between two individuals. In a time when personal cutlery was not always commonplace, especially among the lower classes, eating from a communal bowl was the norm. However, if a young man specifically offered to share his spoon with a young woman, or if they naturally gravitated towards sharing one, it was a subtle, yet significant gesture. You can imagine the scene. Two people, perhaps a bit shy, navigating the single utensil, their fingers brushing, a silent language unfolding over a shared portion of stew. It's certainly a more tactile form of courtship than a grand ballroom dance, isn't it? And perhaps a little less hygienic by modern standards. A quirky, almost humorous aspect of this tradition is the potential for social faux pas or missed signals. Imagine a situation where one person genuinely just needs a spoon, completely oblivious to the romantic overture being extended, or perhaps a suitor, lacking a spare utensil, is forced to share, sending unintended messages. The subtle etiquette around this simple act must have been incredibly intricate, relying heavily on unspoken cues and mutual understanding. Was it a test of patience, a trial by stew? You can almost hear the internal monologue. Are they really offering me their spoon, or do they just not have another clean one? Many historical accounts and folkloric studies discuss the nuances of such rural courtship rituals, though definitive, widespread documentation can be scarce. The precise meanings attached to such simple gestures often varied from village to village, making it difficult to generalize their universal interpretation. Was it a clear declaration of intent, or merely a gentle invitation to further conversation? The context was everything. You might picture the intense scrutiny from onlookers, especially the older women of the household, their eyes keenly observing who shared a spoon with whom and how. Every slight gesture, every lingering touch of hands over the shared utensil would be noted, dissected, and gossiped about later. It was a public performance of private intent, played out over a humble meal. The tension, for the young couple, must have been palpable. This seemingly minor act speaks volumes about the scarcity of resources and the ingenuity of human connection in simpler times. When grand gestures were rare and private moments even rarer, the shared spoon became a vessel for unspoken desires and tentative hopes. It was a practical necessity, repurposed into a delicate dance of courtship, a quiet testament to how even the most mundane objects could be imbued with profound romantic significance. It definitely makes you look at your kitchen drawer full of spoons a little differently, doesn't it? From the subtle intimacy of a shared spoon, you now shift your focus to something far more esoteric, and frankly, a little unhinged, fortune-telling for love. In an age before psychological profiles and compatibility quizzes, desperate lovers and curious youngsters turned to mystics, diviners, and bizarre rituals to peer into their romantic futures. It was less about finding a match, and more about discovering if one was even destined. It's a widely acknowledged truth that superstition permeated every aspect of medieval life, and matters of the heart were no exception. People, from peasants to nobles, consulted various forms of divination to predict everything from their future spouse's appearance to the number of children they'd have. Imagine a young maiden, anxious about her marital prospects, seeking out a wise woman in the village who promised glimpses of the future. The methods were often creative, sometimes gruesome, and always steeped in folklore. You might observe someone trying to discern their love life by interpreting the patterns of tea leaves, or perhaps, far more disturbingly, by observing the entrails of a sacrificed animal. It certainly puts your daily horoscope into perspective, doesn't it? A particularly quirky and chilling tidbit involves scrying with mirrors or water to reveal a future lover's face. This wasn't just gazing into a crystal ball. It was believed that under the right conditions, often at midnight on a specific holy day, a person's true love would appear in the reflective surface. The catch? Sometimes, instead of a handsome suitor, one might see a skull, signifying an early death before marriage, or a monstrous visage, indicating a lifetime of loneliness. Imagine the sheer terror of trying to see your beloved, and instead being greeted by a spectral grimace. It's enough to make you swear off reflective surfaces forever. The historical community continues to debate the extent to which these practices were genuinely believed by all social strata versus being seen as entertainment or desperate acts born of extreme anxiety. While some undoubtedly held deep faith in these divinations, others might have approached them with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, much like someone today might read their horoscope just for fun. However, the sheer volume of references to such practices in medieval texts and legal records suggests their widespread prevalence. You might witness a group of young women gathered around a fire on St. Agnes's Eve, a popular night for love divination. They might be throwing hemp seeds over their shoulders, chanting rhyming spells, or eating a dumb cake in silence, hoping to dream of their future husband. The atmosphere would be a mix of nervous giggles and hushed reverence, each participant desperately hoping for a positive sign, dreading a negative one. These rituals weren't just about prediction, they were also about control, or at least the illusion of it. In a world where so much of one's future was predetermined by birth or circumstance, these magical practices offered a sliver of agency, a hope that destiny could be influenced or at least glimpsed. It offered a sense of preparation, a way to brace oneself for what might come. So, as you observe these desperate attempts to peek behind the veil of fate, you realize that for medieval hearts, the path to love was often paved with superstition, fear, and a healthy dose of bizarre ritual. Having glimpsed into the superstitious anxieties of love, you now notice a more public, yet equally subtle form of romantic communication. Hair braids as signals. Forget flashing signals across a crowded room. In the Middle Ages, the way a woman styled her hair could convey her marital status, her availability, and even her romantic inclinations, all without uttering a single word. It's generally accepted that hair, particularly for women, held significant social and symbolic meaning in medieval society. Long, flowing hair was often associated with maidenhood and purity. Once a woman was married, it was common for her to cover her hair, either with a coif, veil, or wimple, signifying her new status and modesty. However, the specific way hair was braided, adorned, or left uncovered could send a nuanced message to an attentive observer. Imagine trying to decipher an entire romantic biography just from a glance at someone's head. It was a complex visual language. A particularly quirky detail is how the number or style of braids could indicate availability or intent. A single, long braid might signify a young, unmarried woman. Intricate, multiple braids, perhaps adorned with ribbons of a certain colour, could suggest she was betrothed or even subtly hint at her interest in a particular suitor. Conversely, a woman who wore her hair completely unbound, especially outside of very private settings, might be seen as scandalous or sending an overtly suggestive message. It was a delicate balance between conformity and subtle self-expression. You can almost picture the hushed whispers as someone points out, "Did you see Eleanor's new braid? It's definitely a triple knot today." There is considerable academic discussion regarding the regional variations and evolution of these hair codes. While general trends existed, the specifics of what a particular braid or head covering signified could differ significantly between, say, a Flemish town and a rural English village. The passage of time also brought changes, with styles and their meanings adapting to new fashions and social norms. What was considered proper in the 12th century might be seen as outdated or even offensive by the 15th. You might observe a young man subtly checking the hairstyle of a woman he's interested in, trying to ascertain if the green light of availability is literally woven into her hair. For women, it was a subtle form of control, a way to signal interest or disinterest without risking direct confrontation or public embarrassment. It allowed for a delicate dance of courtship where a glance at a braid could convey more than 1,000 words. This silent language of hair also underscores the limited avenues for direct communication, especially for women, in medieval society. When speech was often constrained by social hierarchy and strict propriety, non-verbal cues became paramount. The simple act of styling one's hair transformed into a powerful, albeit quiet, statement about one's place in the romantic landscape. It was a sophisticated system, allowing for hints and nudges, all without the need for an explicit declaration, which for them was quite a practical way to navigate the complexities of attraction. From the silent communication of braided hair, you now find yourself amidst a festive gathering, perhaps at a harvest festival or a village fair, where the air is filled with laughter and the splash of water. Your attention is drawn to a playful, yet surprisingly revealing, courtship game, apple bobbing for suitors. This wasn't just a children's pastime. It was a widely recognized way for young people to playfully, and sometimes quite explicitly, test their romantic luck. It's generally understood that games and communal activities were vital settings for courtship in medieval society, offering rare opportunities for young men and women to interact freely. Apple bobbing, or ducking for apples as it was sometimes known, became a popular fixture at autumn festivals, particularly around Halloween, or All Hallows' Eve. Imagine a barrel filled with water, apples floating tantalizingly on the surface, and a line of eager, blushing faces waiting their turn. The goal: to pluck an apple using only your mouth. It sounds simple, but the romantic implications were anything but. A quirky detail is that the successful retrieval of an apple was often interpreted as a sign of good fortune in love, or even a direct prophecy about one's future spouse. Some variations of the game held that the first apple you bit into would reveal the initial of your true love, or that if you managed to get 2 apples at once, you'd have a double wedding. Imagine the pressure, not just to get the apple, but to somehow decode its hidden romantic message. It adds a whole new level of anxiety to a seemingly innocent game. You can almost hear the whispered hopes and fears as someone dives face first into the cold water. The scholarly community often discusses the blend of pagan and Christian traditions woven into such festive games. While outwardly innocent, many carried echoes of ancient harvest rituals and fertility rites, subtly linking playful competition to the serious business of securing a spouse and ensuring the continuation of the community. Were these games truly believed as prophetic, or were they more a social ritual, a fun excuse for young people to interact and for elders to observe potential matches? It's likely a bit of both, varying with individual belief and local custom. You might observe a young man, dripping wet and sputtering, proudly holding up his apple, his eyes darting towards a particular young woman. Her blush and shy smile in return would confirm the unspoken message. For women, it was a chance to demonstrate their agility and good humour, qualities that were no doubt attractive to potential partners. It provided a sanctioned space for flirting, for testing the waters of attraction in a light-hearted, communal setting, far removed from the formal strictures of arranged marriages or the awkwardness of bundling. This seemingly trivial game highlights the resourceful ways medieval society created opportunities for romantic connection within its strict social framework. When direct courtship was often frowned upon, and privacy was a luxury, these public games offered a vital outlet for burgeoning affections. The apple in the barrel became more than just fruit. It was a symbol of hope, a potential key to unlocking a future shared with another. It certainly makes you appreciate how straightforward a dating profile is, without having to dunk your face into a bucket of water just to get a hint about your next relationship. Leaving the splash and prophetic potential of apple bobbing behind, you now encounter a more refined, yet equally performative aspect of medieval courtship: gifts of poetic verse. For those with literary inclinations and the means to employ a scribe, composing and exchanging poems was a sophisticated way to express admiration, declare affection, and even subtly convey romantic intentions. This wasn't just about rhyming words. It was about demonstrating wit, education, and devotion. It's commonly understood that poetry, particularly in the tradition of courtly love, played a significant role in aristocratic and noble courtship. Imagine a troubadour or a knight crafting intricate verses, perhaps dedicating them to a lady he admired from afar, even if she was married to another. These poems often followed strict forms, like sonnets or ballads, and were filled with elaborate metaphors, allegories, and classical allusions. The suitor would typically elevate the lady to an almost divine status, while portraying himself as her humble, suffering servant, yearning for a mere glance or a kind word. It was a verbal dance, a performance of profound devotion, often without any expectation of a physical relationship. A quirky, almost meta detail is that the act of composing and receiving such verses became a courtship ritual in itself, sometimes more important than the actual content of the feelings expressed. The quality of the verse, the cleverness of the metaphor, and the originality of the compliment could be as attractive as the suitor's physical attributes or noble lineage. Imagine a lady being less impressed by a grand castle and more by a perfectly turned rhyme. It put pressure on the suitor to be not just brave and wealthy, but also intellectually agile and artistically sensitive. And sometimes, these poems were so generic that they could be sent to multiple women, like a medieval male merge for love. Historians continue to debate the genuine emotional depth behind these highly stylized poetic exchanges. While some poems undoubtedly conveyed true and ardent passion, many adhered so strictly to the conventions of courtly love that it's hard to discern individual feeling from literary performance. Was it always about sincere affection, or sometimes just a display of cultural literacy and social standing? The answer likely lies somewhere in between, with some truly heartfelt verses mixed with many formulaic declarations. You might envision a scene in a great hall, where a young nobleman, perhaps accompanied by a lute, recites a newly composed poem to a hushed audience, his gaze fixed upon a particular lady. Her subtle blush or a slight inclination of her head would be his only immediate reward, yet it would be enough. For the recipient, these verses were a form of flattery, a public acknowledgement of her beauty and virtue, and a testament to the suitor's dedication. They were often cherished, kept in private chests, and reread in moments of quiet reflection. These poetic offerings were a form of investment, not just of time and effort, but of reputation. A poorly written poem could be an embarrassment, while a brilliant one could elevate one's standing. In a society where direct declaration of love was often impolite or impossible, especially across social strata, the subtle language of poetry provided a crucial, elegant conduit for romantic expression, adding layers of intellectual and artistic engagement to the pursuit of affection. It certainly makes you wonder if our modern-day emojis and brief texts are missing a certain lyrical charm. Moving beyond the elegant, yet often indirect, world of poetic declarations, you now consider a far more immediate and telling aspect of medieval relationships: public displays of affection. Or, more accurately, the significant lack thereof, especially as you understand it today. In an era governed by strict social codes and the ever-watchful eyes of the community, expressions of romantic intimacy in public were rare, subtle, and heavily nuanced. It is a generally accepted fact that overt public displays of affection, such as kissing or embracing, were largely frowned upon and considered highly inappropriate in medieval society, particularly among the upper classes. Imagine strolling through a medieval market square. You wouldn't see couples holding hands, let alone anything more intimate. Any physical contact between unmarried individuals, or even married ones, was carefully policed by societal norms and community expectations. It wasn't about being unromantic, it was about maintaining propriety and avoiding scandal. A simple touch of hands might be a whispered rumour by sunset. A quirky, almost humorous detail is that what was permissible often depended heavily on context and social standing. A quick, chaste kiss on the cheek between family members might be acceptable, but anything resembling a passionate embrace between unbetrothed individuals was a serious breach of etiquette, potentially damaging reputations and even leading to accusations of impropriety. Think of it as an unspoken rulebook with thousands of unwritten clauses. It's a subtle ballet of glances, faint blushes, and almost imperceptible gestures. You might see a fleeting touch of hands as a man helps a woman onto a horse, or a shared, knowing smile across a crowded room. These were the grand romantic gestures of the day, carefully hidden in plain sight. There is continued scholarly debate about the extent to which these strictures applied to all social classes. While noble and bourgeois classes were under constant scrutiny and adhered to more rigid public behaviours, the peasantry might have had slightly more leeway. Their lives lived more openly and with fewer formal chaperones. However, even in rural settings, reputation was vital, and community censure could be swift and harsh for perceived moral transgressions. How much was genuine modesty, and how much was fear of social retribution? It's a complex interplay. You might observe a subtle lean-in during a quiet conversation at a village well, or a shared moment of laughter that lingers a little too long, hinting at a connection beneath the surface. For a modern person used to seeing couples openly affectionate, the medieval landscape of courtship might seem incredibly restrained, almost devoid of warmth. Yet, within these constraints, people found ways to communicate their feelings. A well-timed compliment, a shared glance, a small, carefully chosen gift exchanged in secret. These were the powerful, intimate signals that spoke volumes in a society that valued discretion above all else. So, as you walk through the medieval street, you realize that the absence of overt affection was not an absence of feeling, but rather a testament to the meticulous social engineering of the time. Love was there, simmering beneath the surface, communicated through a hidden language of subtle cues and implied desires, a testament to enduring human ingenuity in the face of restrictive social norms. Stepping away from the subtle signals of public behavior, you now delve into the more tangible, yet equally mystical, realm of charms and amulets. In a world where unseen forces were believed to influence everything from health to harvests, it was only natural that people would turn to magical objects to attract love or protect burgeoning relationships from ill fate. It's a foundational understanding that medieval people heavily relied on talismans, charms, and amulets for protection and to influence various aspects of their lives, including matters of the heart. Imagine a young woman secretly stitching a tiny, symbolic object into the hem of her dress, or a man carrying a small, carved piece of wood in a pouch, both believing it held the power to sway affection or ensure fidelity. These weren't just decorative items. They were imbued with intention, prayers, and sometimes rather unusual ingredients. It's like a medieval good luck charm, but with far higher stakes and often far stranger origins. A quirky and somewhat unsettling detail is the use of rather morbid or bodily elements in some love charms. While many charms were benign, made from herbs, stones, or simple knots, others involved pieces of bone, dried animal parts, or even human teeth, all believed to possess potent magical properties. Imagine receiving a love token that was, upon closer inspection, a preserved piece of a bat's wing. It sounds like something straight out of a horror film, but for them, it was a legitimate, if desperate, attempt to influence the unpredictable currents of love. You can almost feel a shiver tracing your spine, realizing the lengths some would go to. Scholars continue to debate the theological implications of such practices. While the Church generally condemned overt magic and sorcery, folk magic, particularly related to love, often blurred the lines. Was carrying a love charm an act of pagan superstition or a simple, harmless plea to benevolent forces? The answer often depended on the local priest's interpretation and the specific nature of the charm. This fuzzy boundary highlights the constant tension between official dogma and deeply ingrained popular beliefs. You might observe a quiet transaction in a shadowy corner of the market, where a nervous young person consults with a cunning woman or a local wise man. They might be given a small pouch containing a specific combination of herbs and minerals, instructed to wear it close to their skin or to bury it under a certain tree at midnight. The whispers of incantations, the secrecy surrounding the creation and deployment of these charms, all added to their perceived power and mystique. These charms weren't just about attracting a lover. They were also used to retain affection, to prevent rivals, or to ensure fidelity within a marriage. They were a form of psychological comfort, a tangible manifestation of hope in a world where so much felt outside of individual control. In a time of arranged marriages and limited personal choice, a small, secret charm could represent a powerful personal plea to fate. It certainly makes your modern dating app preferences seem far less dramatic, without any questionable animal parts involved. Shifting from the mystical realm of charms, you now find yourself in a more intimate, yet equally regulated, domestic setting, observing the surprisingly subtle art of featherbed courtship. This wasn't a wild tryst. Rather, it was a sanctioned, albeit highly monitored, form of pre-marital interaction, particularly prevalent in some Germanic and Scandinavian cultures, where couples might spend time together on a bed, but under very specific, chaste conditions. It's commonly known that privacy was a rare commodity in medieval households, and opportunities for young couples to interact without intense scrutiny were limited. The feather-bed courtship, or kunkelstube, spinning room tradition, emerged as a designated space where a suitor could visit his beloved, often in her bedroom, but with strict chaperonage or clear boundaries. Imagine a young couple sitting on the edge of a featherbed, perhaps with a watchful mother spinning in the corner, or even a board placed between them, much like in bundling, ensuring decorum. It offered a degree of comfort and intimacy beyond a public gathering, yet maintained strict propriety. An interesting facet of this custom is how the featherbed itself became a symbolic stage for respectful dialogue and emotional connection. Unlike the rough conditions of bundling, where the focus was often simply on preventing contact, the featherbed setting implied a certain level of comfort and softness, encouraging more tender, whispered conversations. It was less about physical restraint and more about social expectation and the presence of an ever-vigilant chaperone. Picture the scene: quiet conversation, perhaps a shared book or a small game, all while acutely aware of the watchful eyes. It allowed for a deeper emotional bond to form, beyond mere physical attraction. Historians often debate the specific regional variations and strictness of these customs. While the general principle of supervised, chaste interaction was similar, the exact rules and the degree of privacy permitted could differ significantly from one valley to another. Was it truly always chaste, or did human nature sometimes find ways around the watchful eyes? The evidence is often anecdotal, passed down through local law, making it challenging to draw universal conclusions. You might envision the soft light filtering through a small window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, as a young man earnestly recounts his day or shares his hopes for the future with the young woman. She perhaps listens intently, occasionally offering a gentle smile or a soft word. The featherbed, a symbol of domestic comfort and future shared life, became the backdrop for these delicate pre-marital negotiations. It was a space for genuine personality to emerge, for shared values to be discovered, and for a quiet understanding to blossom, all within the strict confines of medieval morality. So, as you observe this unique form of courtship, you realize that even in a seemingly restrictive era, clever methods emerged to foster connection. The featherbed, far from being a symbol of illicit passion, became a quiet haven for respectful dialogue and the gentle unfolding of affection, a testament to the human need for intimacy, even when carefully chaperoned. Moving on from the chaste comfort of the featherbed, your senses are now intrigued by another subtle, yet powerful, tool of medieval attraction: scented pouches and courtship. In an era before pervasive personal hygiene and mass-produced perfumes, a carefully chosen fragrance, discreetly worn, could be a potent, silent declaration of romantic interest. It's widely known that personal scent, often enhanced by natural means, played a role in medieval allure, particularly given the challenges of consistent bathing. Imagine a world where the prevailing aromas were often of rustic. In this context, a delicate, pleasant scent became a mark of distinction, a subtle invitation. A young woman might carry a small pouch filled with fragrant herbs, dried flowers, or spices, tucked into her sleeve or girdle. A man might wear a similar sachet. This wasn't just about smelling nice. It was a curated personal aura, designed to subtly draw attention. It's like a medieval version of a signature cologne, but one you might actually eat if you were hungry enough. An intriguing aspect of these scented pouches, often called pomanders, is their dual purpose, not only to attract but also to ward off unpleasant odours and, in some beliefs, even disease. Made from perforated metal or simply fabric, these containers held aromatic substances like ambergris, civet, musk, or a blend of dried rose petals, lavender, and cloves. The chosen scent wasn't just random. Certain herbs were associated with love, fidelity, or good fortune, adding a layer of symbolic meaning. Imagine the subtle waft of lavender following someone, a delicate hint of their presence, an olfactory calling card. Scholars continue to analyze the precise social and economic implications of these scented accessories. Were they primarily for the wealthy who could afford exotic spices, or did simpler, locally sourced herbal blends allow wider participation? How much was about true attraction, and how much was a display of status and refinement? The answers likely vary across social strata and regions, showing how even a seemingly simple object could reflect complex societal dynamics. You might observe a subtle gesture. A young man, in conversation with a maiden, discreetly shifts his posture, allowing the faint scent of his pouch to drift towards her. Or perhaps a woman, passing by a potential suitor, ensures her sachet swings gently, releasing its fragrance. These were not grand gestures, but quiet, almost subliminal cues. The sense of smell, deeply connected to memory and emotion, could forge an instant, powerful connection, bypassing words entirely. In a world where visual and verbal cues were often restricted by social etiquette, the sense of smell offered a direct, primal pathway for attraction. These scented pouches were a testament to the ingenuity of medieval people in using every available resource, no matter how subtle, to navigate the intricate dance of courtship. They understood that sometimes the most potent message is the one you feel rather than see or hear. Having explored the subtle power of personal scent, you now find yourself amidst a vibrant, joyous gathering, the sound of music filling the air as people move with rhythmic intent. You are witnessing dancing as a mating ritual, a surprisingly formal yet deeply expressive form of courtship that transcended social barriers and allowed for carefully choreographed interactions between potential partners. It is widely acknowledged that dancing was not merely entertainment in medieval society. It was a highly structured social activity that played a crucial role in courtship and community bonding. Imagine a village green or a castle hall, alive with the movement of bodies, not in wild abandon, but in precise, often intricate steps. These dances, such as the carol or the estampie, were communal affairs, allowing young men and women to physically interact, albeit in a chaperoned and stylized manner, in a way rarely permitted otherwise. It was a chance to see and be seen, to subtly gauge compatibility through shared rhythm and movement. An interesting aspect of these dances is the symbolism embedded in their forms and movements. A specific turn, a handhold, or even the distance maintained between partners could convey layers of meaning. For instance, holding hands might be acceptable in a group circle dance, but a prolonged, intimate hand clasp in a partnered dance could send a very clear message of interest. The ability to perform the complex steps with grace and confidence was also a display of social skill and breeding, making a good dancer a highly desirable partner. Imagine trying to subtly flirt while simultaneously executing a perfect branle. It required coordination on multiple levels. The historical record suggests ongoing discussion regarding the spontaneity versus the rigid formality of medieval dances. While some scholars emphasize their strict adherence to choreographed steps and social etiquette, others point to evidence of improvisation and the infusion of personal flair. How much freedom did individuals truly have to express themselves or signal interest within these structured forms? The answer likely varied by region, social class, and the specific type of dance, but it's clear that even within constraints, personal expression found a way. You might observe a young man carefully choosing his partners for each dance, perhaps subtly lingering an extra moment as he takes a particular woman's hand, or ensuring his gaze meets hers during a turn. For the women, it was an opportunity to display their elegance, their vitality, and their charm, all while maintaining a dignified composure. The rhythm of the music, the shared movement, and the fleeting physical contact could create a powerful, unspoken connection, allowing for a chemistry that words alone might not convey. Beyond the formal steps, the sheer joy and energy of the dance provided a rare emotional release. In a society often marked by hardship, these moments of collective celebration were vital. And within that collective joy, individual aspirations for companionship and love found a sanctioned outlet. The dance floor became a microcosm of medieval courtship, a space where social rules and personal desires intertwined, each step a subtle move in the intricate game of attraction. It certainly makes your modern dance move seem a bit less strategic, doesn't it? Having moved through the rhythmic intricacies of medieval dance, your journey now brings you to a more tangible, yet equally symbolic, aspect of courtship: love tokens and their meanings. These weren't grand gifts of jewels or estates, but rather small, often personal objects exchanged between individuals, imbued with deep sentiment and acting as silent promises or declarations of affection. In a world of veiled gestures and unspoken rules, these tokens served as crucial physical anchors for burgeoning feelings. It's a widely acknowledged historical fact that the exchange of small, symbolic gifts was a common and significant part of medieval courtship across various social strata. Imagine a young knight giving his lady a ribbon he wore in a tournament, or a peasant boy carving a delicate wooden bird for his sweetheart. These objects were rarely expensive in material value, but their worth lay in their personal connection, the effort involved in their creation or acquisition, and the message they silently conveyed. They were tangible representations of affection, a physical manifestation of a feeling that often had to remain unspoken. It's like a medieval mood ring, but with far more sincere intentions and a lot less questionable material. A particularly intriguing aspect of these tokens was their often layered symbolism and hidden meanings. A simple flower might signify purity or passion, depending on its type and colour. A knot, intricately tied, could represent eternal fidelity or an unbreakable bond. A coin, perhaps one with a specific engraving, might be given as a promise of future prosperity together. Sometimes, these tokens were half-cut coins or broken rings, with each lover keeping one piece, symbolizing their halves destined to be rejoined. This particular gesture was a powerful visual oath, a constant reminder of the other person and the commitment made. You can almost feel the weight of such a token in your hand, a small, cold object carrying immense emotional heat. The subtlety was key. Only the recipients, and perhaps a few trusted confidants, would fully grasp the depth of the message conveyed. making them secret treasures in plain sight. Scholarly discussion persists regarding the legal weight and social expectations attached to these tokens. While they weren't legally binding like a formal betrothal contract, did breaking off a relationship after exchanging such a token carry social repercussions? Were certain tokens universally understood, or did their meanings vary widely by local custom or even by the individual couple? The nuances are often lost to time, but the sheer volume of literary and archaeological evidence suggests their pervasive presence and significance in daily romantic lives. The informal nature of these exchanges, existing alongside the rigid structures of arranged marriages, highlights the persistent human need for personal connection and expression beyond formal decrees. You might observe a nervous handoff in a quiet corner, a quick glance exchanged as a young woman slips a small embroidered pouch into a man's palm, or a suitor leaving a meticulously carved wooden spoon on a doorstep. For the giver, it was an act of vulnerability, an offering of their heart. For the receiver, it was a moment of quiet revelation, a confirmation of unspoken affection. These tokens became cherished keepsakes, held close during moments of loneliness, a reminder of connection in a world that often felt isolated. They were a testament to the enduring power of human sentiment, a way to bridge the gap between internal feeling and external expression without risking overt declaration. They served as physical mnemonic devices, silently echoing promises and hopes that could not yet be shouted from the rooftops. Consider the craft involved in many of these items. A hand-stitched sampler, a carefully carved piece of bone or wood, or a skillfully braided lock of hair. Each represented not just sentiment, but also time, effort, and skill. This added another layer of value beyond the symbolic meaning. It communicated dedication, patience, and a willingness to invest personal resources into the relationship, qualities highly prized in a partner during the medieval period. It wasn't just about what was given, but how it was made, and the personal essence poured into it. These were not disposable trinkets. They were often meant to last, just like the love they represented, serving as enduring testaments to a burgeoning bond. And think about the secrecy. Many of these tokens would have been exchanged discreetly, perhaps hidden from parents or watchful chaperones. This added an element of thrilling rebellion, a small act of defiance against a world that often sought to control every aspect of a young person's life, especially their romantic attachments. The act of giving or receiving a token could feel like sharing a secret language, a private understanding that set the couple apart from the rest of the world. This hidden dimension surely amplified the emotional weight of each small object, turning it into a powerful emblem of shared hope and quiet rebellion. It suggests that even within a highly structured society, individuals found ways to carve out spaces for personal, heartfelt connection, relying on these material symbols to carry the weight of their unspoken affections. From the intimate whispers of exchanged love tokens, your journey now leads you directly into the imposing presence of the Church's role in medieval marriage. Far from being a mere backdrop, the Church, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, wielded immense power over marital customs, transforming what was often a civil or familial arrangement into a sacrament, thus deeply shaping the dating and matrimonial landscape for every soul, from peasant to king. It's a fundamental historical truth that by the 12th century the Church had firmly established marriage as one of the 7 holy sacraments, asserting its authority over betrothal, union, and separation. Before this, marriage was often more of a private contract or a familial agreement, with customs varying widely, but with the Church's decree, the religious ceremony became paramount. Imagine a couple standing before a stern-faced priest, not just their families, but the very divine presence invoked to sanctify their union. This meant a shift from simple hand-fasting or secular agreements to public vows made before God and the community, often at the church door itself. This institutionalization fundamentally altered the nature of courtship. Now, the path to a legitimate union invariably led through the ecclesiastical gates. ensuring a level of spiritual oversight that had not previously existed. A particularly impactful, and often debated, aspect of the Church's influence was its insistence on consent, specifically the mutual consent of both parties, rather than just parental consent, for a valid marriage. While parental arrangements remained overwhelmingly common, the Church theoretically championed the idea that a marriage could be valid if two individuals publicly declared their intention and consummated the union, even against their parents' wishes. This created a fascinating tension. Families desired strategic alliances, but the Church presented a theological loophole for love matches or defiant elopements. Imagine the whispers in the village, the moral dilemmas, the subtle power struggle between hearth and altar. This unique stance, while often overshadowed by practical realities, introduced a revolutionary concept of individual agency into marital decisions, even if rarely exercised by the majority. Historians widely discuss the practical implications of the Church's consent doctrine. While theoretically empowering, how often did it truly override parental authority in practice? For noble families, the economic and political consequences of a love match defying dynastic plans could be catastrophic, often leading to disinheritance or even violence. For peasants, a marriage without familial blessing could mean loss of land or community support. So, while the Church offered a pathway, the social and economic realities often forced adherence to traditional arrangements. This complex interplay between divine law and earthly necessity continues to be a rich area of academic inquiry. You might witness the spectacle of a formal wedding, conducted with solemn ritual, the procession, the vows exchanged before the altar, the blessing of the rings, and the final pronouncement. For a medieval person, this wasn't just a social event, it was a deeply spiritual act, binding two souls in the eyes of God, promising salvation through their consecrated union. This sacred dimension also meant that marriage, once entered into, was extraordinarily difficult to dissolve. Divorce, as we know it, was virtually impossible, with annulments granted only under very specific, narrow circumstances, such as unconsummated unions or undisclosed pre-existing impediments, like consanguinity. This permanence placed immense pressure on the initial choice of a partner. If you married, it was for life, until death do us part, with very little recourse if the union proved unhappy. This lifelong commitment undoubtedly shaped the nature of courtship, making it a more serious, deliberate affair, even if the primary decision-makers were often families rather than the individuals themselves. The Church's pervasive influence meant that even the most seemingly personal decisions about love and partnership were ultimately viewed through a theological lens, tying individual romantic aspirations to the grand tapestry of divine will and salvation. It certainly added a layer of gravity that modern nuptials often lack, with little thought given to the potential wrath of an angry saint if things went sour. From the unyielding embrace of the Church's matrimonial doctrines, your perspective now shifts to the very practical, yet often brutal, reality underpinning many medieval unions, dowries, and property. Forget grand declarations of love. For many families, marriage was fundamentally an economic transaction, a careful negotiation of assets, land, and future financial stability. This wasn't just about a bride's personal wealth. It was about the transfer of substantial resources between households. It's an undeniable historical fact that the dowry was a cornerstone of medieval marriage, particularly among the gentry and nobility, serving as a crucial economic contribution from the bride's family to the groom's household. Imagine a father calculating his daughter's worth not in terms of her charm or intelligence, but in the acreage of land, the number of cattle, or the chests full of coin he could provide. This dowry wasn't simply a gift to the bride. It was often given directly to the groom or his family upon marriage, designed to support the new couple and solidify the economic base of their new household. In many ways, it was an investment in the social and financial ascent of both families, ensuring the bride was seen as bringing tangible value to the union. An often overlooked aspect of the dowry system is its dual function as both a form of security for the wife and an economic incentive for the husband. While the dowry typically passed into the husband's control, it was often understood that if the wife became a widow, this dowry, or an equivalent amount, would revert to her, providing her with a means of support. This concept, known as dower or jointure in some legal systems, offered a measure of financial protection in an age where women had limited independent economic rights. Imagine the meticulous accounting, the legal wrangling, and the endless debates over livestock valuations. It sounds more like a business merger than a romantic union, doesn't it? Scholarly discussion continues regarding the precise variations of dowry customs across different regions and social classes. While it was pervasive, the nature of the dowry could differ wildly, from significant land holdings for the elite, to livestock and household goods for prosperous peasants, to perhaps just a few pieces of clothing for the very poor. The specific legal instruments used to secure dowries also varied, highlighting a complex tapestry of local laws and customs that governed these crucial transactions. This intricate system speaks to the pervasive economic considerations that often overshadowed purely romantic aspirations. You might witness a bustling scene at a notary's office, or perhaps a formal gathering in a great hall, where scribes meticulously record the specifics of a dowry agreement. The tension would be palpable as families negotiated every last detail, from the number of sheep to the precise value of a manor. For the young couple, their future prosperity, and indeed their very ability to establish a household, hinged on these negotiations. A large dowry could secure a more advantageous match, while a meagre one might limit prospects significantly. This emphasis on property and wealth fundamentally shaped courtship, particularly for the upper classes. Eligibility was often defined less by personal appeal and more by the size of one's potential inheritance or the generosity of one's family. Love, if it came, was often a fortunate byproduct of a well-negotiated economic arrangement. It wasn't a matter of, do I love him, but will his family accept my dowry? This economic reality underscores the harsh pragmatism of medieval life, where survival and security often trumped individual desires in the grand scheme of finding a partner. It certainly makes you appreciate the relative simplicity of splitting a dinner bill on a first date without a legal team present. Stepping away from the calculated economics of dowries, you now catch a glimpse of the more passionate, defiant side of medieval courtship, runaway elopements. While the church and families exerted immense control over marriage, the human heart, being stubbornly irrational, sometimes rebelled, leading couples to risk everything for love, fleeing their homes to marry without consent. It's an acknowledged, if often romanticized, historical fact that elopement, though socially risky and often legally dubious, provided a desperate pathway for couples to marry against the wishes of their families or feudal lords. Imagine a moonlit night, two young lovers, perhaps cloaked and huddled, slipping silently from a castle or a village, leaving behind their former lives for an uncertain future. This wasn't a casual decision, it was a profound act of defiance, carrying severe consequences ranging from disinheritance and social ostracism to, in extreme cases, pursuit and forced return. It was the medieval equivalent of saying, "You can't tell me who to love," with potentially fatal implications. An intriguing aspect of these elopements was the Church's somewhat ambiguous stance, which sometimes inadvertently encouraged them. As discussed, the Church recognized the validity of a marriage based on mutual consent and consummation, even if performed without parental blessing. This doctrine, while intended to uphold the sacrament, sometimes became a loophole for runaway lovers. If a couple could reach a priest willing to marry them, and then consummate the union, the marriage was often considered valid in the eyes of the Church, even if the family was furious. Imagine the desperate dash to the nearest parish, hoping to find a sympathetic cleric before an angry father caught up. Historians continue to debate the frequency and true success rates of such elopements, While romantic tales abound, the reality was often harsh. Many eloping couples, particularly those from lower social strata, faced immense economic hardship and social isolation if they lost their family's support. For the nobility, an unauthorized marriage could lead to political instability and even armed conflict. How many such unions truly led to a happily ever after? And how many ended in tragedy or bitter reconciliation? The records are often biased, making it difficult to fully assess the lived experiences of these defiant couples. You might envision the sheer terror and exhilaration of the escape, the pounding hearts, the hushed whispers, the constant fear of discovery. Every shadow might hide a pursuer, every distant sound might be the thud of approaching hooves. Yet, for those desperate enough, the promise of self-determination, the chance to choose their own partner, outweighed the overwhelming risks. For a brief, shining moment, they were masters of their own destiny, defying a world that sought to control every aspect of their lives. These acts of rebellion highlight the inherent human desire for agency and romantic autonomy, even in the face of rigid social structures. Elopement was a testament to the power of love, or at least intense desire, to override reason, economic security, and even personal safety. It wasn't the ideal path, but for some, it was the only path to a union of their own choosing. In a time when choices were few, running away was the ultimate, desperate expression of individual will in matters of the heart, a stark contrast to the arranged unions that characterized the majority of medieval marriages. From the breathless drama of runaway elopements, your journey through medieval relationships now brings you to a more poignant, yet equally complex aspect: widows and widowers remarrying. In a society where life was often harsh and short, and marriage was as much a practical necessity as a romantic ideal, the prospect of finding a second, or even third, partner after the death of a spouse presented unique challenges and opportunities. It's a historical truth that remarriage was a common and often crucial phenomenon in medieval society, driven by economic necessity, social stability, and the practical demands of household management. Imagine a grieving widow, perhaps with several young children, facing the daunting task of running a farm or a workshop alone, or a widower, needing someone to manage his household and care for his offspring. Remarriage wasn't just about finding companionship. It was often a matter of survival. For women, it could mean regaining a measure of social standing and economic security, as a single woman or widow often faced significant vulnerabilities. For men, it meant ensuring their household ran smoothly and their children were cared for. It was a pragmatic decision often made out of necessity, not always love, though affection could certainly grow. An interesting nuance is the differing social expectations and legal rights regarding remarriage for men versus women. While widowers were generally encouraged to remarry quickly, particularly if they needed a new mistress of the house or mother for their children, widows often faced more scrutiny. A wealthy widow, especially one with a significant dower or inheritance, became a highly desirable marriage prospect. Sometimes, even a target for forced marriages orchestrated by greedy relatives or overlords eager to control her assets. Conversely, a widow of modest means might struggle to find a new partner, or find herself pressured into a less advantageous match. You can almost feel the weight of these differing expectations, a complex web of opportunity and constraint. Scholars continually discuss the agency of widows in remarriage. While some clearly had more autonomy, particularly wealthy widows who controlled their own dowers, many were still subject to familial or feudal pressures. How much choice did a grieving woman truly have when her economic survival, and that of her children, depended on finding a new husband quickly? The romantic ideal often clashed with the harsh realities of power and property. This ongoing debate highlights the precarious position many medieval women, even those with perceived wealth, occupied within the social structure. You might observe a scene where a widower, perhaps older and weary, engages in careful negotiations with the family of a potential second wife. focusing on practicalities like shared responsibilities and the blending of two existing families. Or a widow, cautiously considering a suitor, not just for his affection, but for his ability to provide security and stability. The courtship in these situations was often less about youthful passion and more about mature consideration, practical compatibility, and the careful merging of lives already shaped by experience and loss. It was a union built on shared burdens and mutual benefit, rather than naive idealism. The Church, too, played a complex role. While it largely approved of remarriage, especially for procreation, some theologians viewed it as less virtuous than a first marriage, particularly for women, who were encouraged to remain chaste widows. This created a subtle moral dilemma for those contemplating a second union, adding another layer of societal pressure to an already fraught decision. Yet, despite these varied pressures, the human need for companionship, support, and the continuation of family life often triumphed, demonstrating an enduring resilience in the face of loss. These second chances were a testament to medieval pragmatism and the profound human capacity to rebuild and adapt, proving that love and partnership could indeed bloom more than once, even if the circumstances were often less than ideal. Shifting from the pragmatic considerations of remarriage, you now enter a realm of idealized romance that often existed more in song and story than in everyday life. Courtly love ideals. This wasn't about tangible courtship rituals or practical unions. It was a sophisticated literary and philosophical concept of love, often unrequited and unattainable, that profoundly influenced medieval art, poetry, and the very notion of romantic desire among the elite. It's a well-established historical concept that courtly love, or fin amour as it was known in Occitan, was a literary phenomenon originating in the courts of southern France around the 11th and 12th centuries, characterized by an idealized, often non-sexual devotion of a knight to a married noblewoman. Imagine a dashing knight, not fighting dragons for land, but composing heart-wrenching poems for a lady who is unattainable, perhaps his feudal lord's wife. This love was typically secret, deeply passionate, and involved the knight performing chivalrous deeds, enduring suffering, and striving for moral excellence, all to earn a mere glance or a symbolic favour from his beloved. It was a love that purified the soul, a profound spiritual yearning rather than a pursuit of physical consummation. It sounds a bit like a medieval fan fiction, doesn't it? A highly elaborate, often agonizingly chaste one. A fascinating, almost contradictory aspect of courtly love is its inherent tension with the institution of marriage. The object of affection was almost always a married woman, and the love was explicitly not meant to lead to marriage or physical infidelity. Indeed, it was often argued that true love could not exist within marriage, as marriage was a pragmatic arrangement, while courtly love was a freely chosen, passionate devotion. This created a highly complex moral and social dilemma, celebrated in literature but deeply problematic in real life. Imagine trying to explain to your spouse that your truest love is for someone else's partner, but it's pure love, so it's fine. Good luck with that. Scholars continually debate the extent to which courtly love was ever actually practiced in medieval society versus remaining a purely literary convention. Was it a code of conduct that truly guided the behaviour of knights and ladies, or was it mostly a poetic fantasy, a way for poets to explore complex emotions and social paradoxes? While some argue for its influence on real-life manners and chivalry, others contend that actual illicit affairs were rare and certainly not idealized. This ongoing discussion highlights the divide between idealized literary representations and the often gritty realities of medieval life and relationships. You might envision a knight, sitting by candlelight in a lonely tower, meticulously crafting a poem filled with hyperbolic praise for his lady, perhaps attaching a small, symbolic token to be discreetly delivered by a loyal squire. For the lady, receiving such attention, even if purely platonic and literary, could be a source of validation, a testament to her beauty and virtue in a society that often limited her public recognition. It offered an outlet for emotional intensity and romantic longing in a world where direct, passionate courtship was often constrained. This concept, though idealized, provided a framework for sophisticated social interaction and a cultural appreciation for refined emotion. It elevated women, at least in a literary sense, to objects of profound veneration, pushing against some of the more patriarchal norms of the time. Courtly love, with its emphasis on suffering, devotion, and unattainable beauty, added a layer of profound psychological complexity to the medieval understanding of desire, shaping not just how people thought about love, but how they expressed it, even if primarily through art. It truly makes you wonder if our modern dating woes are any less complicated than those faced by a knight pining for his inaccessible muse. Stepping away from the lofty ideals of courtly love, which often remained in the realm of poetry, you now encounter a more down-to-earth, yet equally intriguing, social phenomenon: mock marriages and festivities. These were playful, non-binding ceremonies, often enacted during village festivals or seasonal celebrations, which allowed young people to mimic the rituals of marriage in a light-hearted way, offering a unique blend of entertainment, social commentary, and subtle courtship. It's widely understood that communal festivities provided essential outlets for social interaction and playful transgression in medieval life, and mock marriages were a prime example. Imagine a spring festival, where laughter rings through the air as a young man and woman, chosen for their good humour or perhaps their unspoken mutual interest, are married in a comical ceremony. There would be mock vows, playful pronouncements, and perhaps even a pretend feast, all conducted with tongue firmly in cheek. This wasn't a real wedding, of course, but it allowed for a public display of affection and potential compatibility that real life often didn't permit. It was like a medieval improv show, where the theme was getting hitched, and everyone was in on the joke. A particularly charming aspect of these mock marriages was their function as a testing ground for potential pairings and a subtle form of public matchmaking. While a joke on the surface, the selection of the bride and groom was often not entirely random. Community members, or perhaps even the young people themselves, might subtly push together individuals they thought would make a good real-life couple. The reactions of the married couple, their blushes, their ease with each other, their willingness to play along, could be keenly observed by others. It was a way for the community to nudge potential lovers together, or for individuals to gauge public opinion about a match, all under the guise of festive merriment. You can almost hear the giggles and knowing winks from the onlookers, silently speculating on whether this mock union might one day become real. Many historians analyze these playful ceremonies as safety valves within a rigid social structure, allowing for temporary inversions of power or expressions of desire that would otherwise be suppressed. The academic discussion often focuses on whether these rituals merely reinforced existing social norms or if they sometimes subtly challenged them, giving voice to unconventional desires or highlighting societal pressures. How much was genuine fun, and how much was a veiled way of dealing with the serious business of marriage? It's a fascinating question, revealing the complex layers of medieval folk culture. You might observe the mock bride and groom being paraded through the village, showered with comical gifts, and subjected to playful teasing. For the participants, it was a chance to experience the feeling of being a married couple, if only for a few hours, without the lifelong commitment. It allowed for a temporary suspension of social rules, fostering a sense of camaraderie and collective joy. These events also served as a way to teach younger generations about the rituals and responsibilities of marriage, albeit in a light-hearted, digestible format. These festive mock unions, while seemingly trivial, were vital threads in the fabric of medieval community life. They provided a space where the anxieties and pressures of real marriage could be momentarily diffused through humour and play. They offered a unique arena for courtship, blending public spectacle with personal interaction, reminding everyone that even the most serious life decisions could benefit from a touch of lightness and communal engagement. It certainly makes you wonder if we're missing out on some genuine fun by taking modern dating quite so seriously. From the festive antics of mock marriages, you now transition to a more practical, yet deeply symbolic, preparatory aspect of medieval courtship and marriage, the bridal chest and its preparations. This wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a tangible symbol of a woman's future, accumulating over years as she gathered the linens, clothing, and household goods that would equip her future home and showcase her readiness for married life. It's a foundational understanding that the collection of a bridal trousseau, stored within a specially crafted chest, was a widespread and essential tradition for young women across various social classes in medieval Europe. Imagine a young girl, perhaps barely into her teens, already beginning to carefully gather embroidered cloths, finely woven tunics, and perhaps even small pieces of pewter or pottery. This wasn't merely about having possessions, it was a demonstration of her skill, her industry, and her family's ability to provide for her future. The bridal chest, often called a cassone in Italy or a kista elsewhere, became a repository of dreams and practical necessities, patiently awaiting the day it would be moved into her husband's home. A particularly poignant aspect of these preparations was the personal effort and emotional investment women poured into their bridal chests. Many of the items, especially linens and clothing, would be hand-spun, woven, or embroidered by the young woman herself, often with the help of her mother, sisters, or female relatives. Each stitch, each carefully folded piece, represented hours of labour and hopeful anticipation for her future role as a wife and homemaker. It wasn't just about accumulating goods, it was about cultivating the skills and virtues expected of a medieval woman. Imagine the pride in her eyes as she adds another perfectly stitched pillowcase, knowing it represents a step closer to her own household. This intimate connection with the items made the chest more than just storage. It was a personal narrative of preparation and aspiration, a silent testament to her readiness for domesticity. Historians often discuss the societal pressures associated with these bridal chests. While a well-stocked chest could enhance a young woman's marriage prospects, a meagre one might suggest a lack of industriousness or family means, potentially hindering her chances. The academic debate often centers on how much these preparations genuinely reflected a woman's individual skill versus her family's economic standing. Was the chest primarily a reflection of personal diligence or a display of inherited wealth? The answer likely varied greatly, but the expectation to contribute materially to the future household was almost universal. This illustrates how personal effort and familial resources intertwined in the medieval pursuit of a suitable match. You might envision a domestic scene, a mother teaching her daughter to mend a delicate piece of linen, explaining its importance for her future married life. Or a young woman proudly displaying a new blanket she wove herself, imagining it gracing the bed she would one day share with her husband. The act of accumulating these items was a gradual, tangible form of courtship, preparing the woman not just for a wedding day, but for an entire life of partnership and household management. It instilled a sense of responsibility and foresight, crucial qualities in a world where every resource counted. The bridal chest was therefore much more than furniture. It was a potent symbol of transition, marking the journey from girlhood to womanhood, from dependence to the head of her own domestic sphere. Its contents embodied the skills, expectations, and future hopes placed upon a medieval bride. It was a silent testament to the years of quiet labour and dreams woven into fabric and polished into metal, waiting for the day they would unfold in a new home. This meticulous preparation highlights the pragmatic and long-term view of marriage prevalent in the Middle Ages, where courtship wasn't just about fleeting romance, but about the diligent building blocks of a stable future. It makes you realize how much effort went into simply being ready for marriage, long before a suitor even appeared on the scene. Having observed the meticulous preparations of the bridal chest, you now delve into an overarching layer of medieval life that profoundly impacted courtship and marriage. superstitions and omens. In an age before scientific understanding, when the world was seen as animated by unseen forces and divine will, every unusual event, every fleeting sign, could be interpreted as a message about one's romantic destiny. This wasn't just about belief, it was a constant, anxious search for clues in the fabric of everyday existence. It's a fundamental understanding that medieval people lived in a world steeped in pervasive superstition, where omens and magical beliefs profoundly influence daily decisions, including those concerning love and marriage. Imagine a young person anxiously watching the flight of birds, hoping for a sign, or interpreting a sudden sneeze as an indication of their romantic future. These beliefs were not dismissed as mere folklore. They were a serious, if often informal system for understanding and attempting to control an unpredictable world. From the timing of a proposal to the success of a union, almost every aspect could be read through the lens of divine or mystical influence. It was less about free will and more about discerning the will of the cosmos, often through rather bizarre interpretations. A particularly fascinating aspect of these omens was their highly localized and often contradictory interpretations. What might be considered a good omen for love in one village, perhaps seeing two magpies, could be a bad one in another, or even for a different aspect of life. Many beliefs centered around specific days of the week, phases of the moon, or natural phenomena. For instance, finding a four-leaf clover wasn't just general good luck, it might be specifically believed to lead you to your true love. Or tripping on your way to meet a suitor might be seen as a dire warning to reconsider. You can almost feel the nervous energy, the constant scanning of the environment for hidden messages, the internal struggle between hope and dread with every rustle of leaves or distant cry of an animal. Scholarly discussion often explores the psychological functions of these superstitions. Did they provide comfort in a chaotic world, offering a sense of order and predictability? Or did they create more anxiety, as individuals constantly feared misinterpreting a sign or incurring bad luck? While official church doctrine often condemned such practices as pagan, popular belief persisted, illustrating the deep-seated human need to find meaning and control in uncertain circumstances. This constant tension between spiritual authority and folk practice reveals the complex interplay of faith and fear in medieval minds. You might observe a young woman whispering a charm over a discarded apple peel, throwing it over her shoulder and hoping it would land in the shape of her beloved's initial. Or a group of friends sharing tales of love dreams, dreams believed to foretell future spouses, sometimes requiring specific rituals to induce them, like eating a salty meal before bed. The excitement, the nervous laughter, the collective interpretations of these signs formed a vibrant part of youthful courtship. Even though these acts might seem illogical to a modern mind, for them they were tangible ways to engage with their destiny, to coax a favourable outcome from the universe. These ubiquitous beliefs meant that courtship was not just about interacting with other people, it was about interacting with the very fabric of reality, seeking validation and guidance from signs and portents. Every unexpected event, every dream, every animal crossing one's path could be a message, transforming the mundane into the miraculous. This heightened sensitivity to unseen forces added a profound layer of mystical intrigue and indeed anxiety to the already complex process of finding a partner. It truly makes you wonder how much more complicated dating would be if every dropped spoon or flickering candle held a secret message about your romantic future. From the mystical interpretations of omens, you now turn to a very human and often essential figure in the medieval dating landscape, the village matchmaker. Long before algorithms and dating apps, communities relied on shrewd, often elderly, individuals who possessed an intimate knowledge of local families, their fortunes, and their children's temperaments to broker suitable unions. This was matchmaking as a dedicated craft, an art of negotiation and subtle persuasion. It's a widely recognized historical reality that in many medieval communities, especially in rural areas. Informal matchmakers played a crucial role in arranging marriages, acting as intermediaries between families. Imagine an elderly woman, perhaps the village midwife or a respected elder, known for her sharp wit and even sharper eye for a good match. Her reputation rested on her ability to connect individuals and families in ways that benefited all parties, securing economic stability and social harmony. She wouldn't just introduce two young people, she would weigh their families' lands, their temperaments, their prospects, and their reputations. It was less about romantic sparks and more about forging a stable, viable household. It's like a human search engine for spouses, but one that knew all the local gossip. A particularly fascinating aspect of the matchmaker's role was their deep understanding of local lineage and the intricacies of forbidden degrees of kinship. The Church strictly prohibited marriage between relatives up to the 4th or even 7th degree of consanguinity, blood relation, or affinity, relation by marriage. The matchmaker, with her encyclopedic knowledge of family trees, was essential for navigating these complex rules, ensuring that a proposed match wasn't incestuous in the eyes of the Church, a serious offence. Imagine the matchmaker pulling out an imaginary family tree, meticulously tracing lines, saying, "Oh no, dear, his great-aunt twice removed shared a pig with your second cousin's grandfather. That's too close." This intricate knowledge made her an indispensable figure, preventing countless potential headaches and even annulments. Scholars continually debate the extent of the matchmaker's influence and the degree of autonomy individuals retained in these arranged unions. While the matchmaker proposed, the final decision usually rested with the families, and to some extent, with the young people themselves, especially due to the Church's emphasis on consent. However, the matchmaker's persuasive skills and intimate knowledge of potential partners certainly guided choices. How much was genuine persuasion, and how much was simply presenting the most pragmatic options? This ongoing discussion highlights the tension between personal choice and societal pressure in medieval marital arrangements. You might observe a discreet meeting between a family matriarch and the local matchmaker, perhaps over a cup of ale by the hearth. The conversation would be indirect at first, veiling intentions behind discussions of harvests and weather, before subtly shifting to the qualities of a certain son or daughter. The matchmaker, having observed the potential candidates for years, would offer insights, suggest suitable partners, and perhaps even highlight potential pitfalls. For the young people, the matchmaker was a formidable, yet often benevolent, force, holding the key to their future. Her pronouncements could fill hearts with dread or hopeful anticipation. Beyond simply pairing individuals, the matchmaker also played a vital role in smoothing over initial awkwardness, negotiating dowries, and even mediating early disputes between families. She was a social lubricant, ensuring that the complex machinery of medieval marriage ran as smoothly as possible. Her wisdom, her network, and her ability to read people made her an invaluable asset to any community seeking to maintain its social fabric and ensure the continuation of its lines. It's a powerful reminder that human connection, even for something as profound as finding a life partner, often relies on the unseen efforts of those who understand the intricate dances of family and community. It truly makes you wonder if our modern dating algorithms could ever capture the nuanced, deeply human understanding of a skilled medieval matchmaker. Leaving the astute observations of the village matchmaker behind, you now confront a more sensitive, yet unavoidable aspect of medieval courtship: physical defects and marriage. In a pragmatic society where physical capability was often directly linked to one's ability to contribute to a household and produce heirs, perceived imperfections could significantly impact marital prospects, shaping destinies in ways that feel harsh to a modern sensibility. It's a stark historical reality that physical well-being and the absence of obvious deformities were often highly valued attributes in potential medieval spouses, impacting their marriageability, particularly in a rural, agricultural society. Imagine a young person with a pronounced limp, a visible scar, or perhaps a chronic illness. While compassion certainly existed, the practical concerns of labor, childbearing, and physical resilience often overshadowed purely romantic considerations. A family seeking a strong son-in-law to work the land, or a healthy daughter-in-law capable of childbearing and managing a household, might bypass an individual with perceived physical shortcomings, however kind or intelligent they might be. It was a harsh reality driven by necessity, not malice. An intriguing, yet often tragic, aspect was the superstitious interpretations sometimes attached to physical defects. Beyond the practical concerns, some deformities or illnesses were occasionally seen as signs of divine disfavor, ill omens, or even evidence of witchcraft, further stigmatizing the individual. This added a layer of social and spiritual burden to an already challenging situation, making it even harder for those afflicted to find acceptance or a partner. Imagine bearing not just a physical challenge, but also the subtle, or not so subtle, judgment of your community, subtly hindering your path to marriage. It's a somber reminder of a time when difference was often met with suspicion, not understanding. Scholarly discussion frequently addresses the varying social responses to disability and physical difference across medieval society. While some individuals with disabilities found ways to integrate and even thrive within their communities, particularly if they possessed unique skills or wealth, many faced significant marginalization. The academic debate often centers on how much of this was practical concern versus prejudice, and how the Church's teachings on charity and the value of all souls balanced with societal realities. The fluidity of medieval social structures often meant that an individual's value could fluctuate based on context and their family's standing, making their marriage prospects equally unpredictable. You might witness a suitor's family discreetly inquiring about the health of a prospective bride or groom, their questions veiled in politeness but aimed at uncovering any hidden weaknesses. For individuals living with a noticeable physical difference, courtship could be a particularly anxious and often heartbreaking experience. They might face rejection, subtle disdain, or be relegated to less desirable matches simply because their bodies did not conform to the ideal of robust health and capability. Their inner qualities, their wit, their kindness, their spiritual devotion, might often be overlooked in favor of purely physical or economic considerations. This pragmatic approach to physical attributes underscores the profound material realities of medieval life. Marriage was a partnership in labor, survival, and progeny. Therefore, any perceived impediment to these core functions could render an individual less desirable as a spouse. While love and affection could certainly blossom, the initial gateway to marriage was often guarded by considerations of physical strength, health, and the promise of future generations. It's a sobering contrast to modern sensibilities, where personal qualities and individual compatibility are, ideally, prioritized, reminding us of the stark differences in values and priorities across historical eras. It makes you realize that sometimes finding a partner back then was less about a charming smile and more about a robust physique and the ability to swing an axe. Moving beyond the harsh realities of physical attributes, you now enter a more melodic and emotionally resonant aspect of medieval courtship: music as a courtship tool. Long before mixtapes and curated playlists, the ability to play an instrument, sing a ballad, or compose a tune was a powerful, often irresistible, way to express affection, convey longing, and subtly woo a potential partner. It's a delightful historical fact that music played an integral role in social gatherings and courtship rituals across medieval society, offering a socially acceptable and highly expressive outlet for romantic intentions. Imagine a young troubadour strumming a lute beneath a lady's window, or a group of young people singing lively ballads at a village feast. Music transcended social barriers, appealing to senses and emotions in a way that mere words often couldn't. It created an atmosphere conducive to romance, softening defenses and allowing for a different kind of connection to form. It was the medieval equivalent of putting on a carefully chosen song to set the mood, but with far more effort and often a much more public performance. A particularly charming aspect was the symbolism embedded within the choice of instrument and the type of song. A lute, often associated with courtly love, might convey refined sentiment and devoted adoration. A simpler folk song, played on a pipe or a drum at a village gathering, could signal joy, vitality, and an openness to rustic pleasures. The lyrics of ballads were often rich with romantic narratives, tales of unrequited love, heroic deeds for a lady's favour, or the joys of marital bliss. By selecting a particular song, a suitor could subtly convey their feelings or hint at their intentions without direct, potentially awkward, verbal declarations. Imagine a young woman blushing as a ballad about a valiant knight's devotion is sung, knowing the singer's gaze is fixed upon her. Scholarly discussion often explores the dual nature of musical performance in courtship. Was it primarily a display of skill and social grace, or a genuine conduit for emotional expression? While certainly a talented musician would be seen as more desirable, the power of music to evoke feelings and create a shared emotional experience cannot be underestimated. The academic debate often focuses on how much spontaneity was allowed within formal musical traditions, and whether musical talent was a prerequisite for courtship or simply an enhancement. It's a nuanced question that speaks to the balance between artistic performance and authentic feeling. You might observe a scene at a noble court where a minstrel, perhaps secretly enamoured, performs a newly composed lay that subtly praises the virtues of a particular lady, using metaphors only she would fully grasp. Or in a village, a young man known for his beautiful singing voice might strategically position himself near the young woman he admires during a communal song, his voice carrying extra warmth when their eyes meet. For the recipient, being the subject of such musical attention was a profound compliment, a public acknowledgement of their worth and beauty. It created a bond that transcended mere physical presence, fostering an emotional connection through shared melody and lyrical sentiment. This use of music highlights the creative ways medieval people navigated the complexities of attraction within their social constraints. When direct conversation or overt flirting was often discouraged, music provided a universal language for the heart. It allowed for a sophisticated dance of feeling, expressed through notes and verses, creating an atmosphere ripe for budding romance. It was a testament to the enduring human need for emotional connection and the power of art to convey what words alone could not. It truly makes you wonder if our modern dating lives would be enriched if we all had to compose a ballad or learn a lute tune before asking someone out. From the sweet melodies of musical courtship, you now move to a more universally recognized, yet surprisingly complex gesture in medieval romance: kissing customs and meanings. While a kiss today often signifies straightforward romantic affection, in the Middle Ages, its significance was far more nuanced, varying wildly depending on context, social status, and the specific type of kiss exchanged. It's a clear historical insight that kissing in the Middle Ages was not exclusively a romantic act. It served various social, familial, and ritualistic purposes, each carrying distinct meanings. Imagine a king kissing a vassal as a sign of fealty, or family members exchanging pecks on the cheek as a greeting. Within the realm of courtship, however, a kiss could indeed signal burgeoning affection, but its nature, whether chaste, formal, or more intimate, was intensely scrutinized. It was a language of touch, with an intricate grammar known to all. This complexity meant that a single kiss could either be a subtle flirtation or a profound commitment, depending entirely on the circumstances. An intriguing aspect of these customs was the hierarchy of kisses, from the most formal to the most intimate, each with its own implications for a budding relationship. A kiss of peace, exchanged during a religious ceremony or as a greeting, carried no romantic meaning whatsoever. A chaste kiss on the hand or cheek might signify admiration or respect, a polite acknowledgement of beauty or status. However, a mouth kiss, particularly one given or received in private, was often understood as a significant step towards betrothal or even an informal pledge of marriage. This distinction was crucial. Misinterpreting a kiss could lead to social embarrassment, shattered expectations, or even legal disputes. Imagine the pressure of deciphering whether that shared moment was a polite farewell or a silent promise of forever. Scholarly debate often focuses on the blurred lines between pre-betrothal kisses and actual consent to marriage. While the Church recognized consent as paramount, a kiss, particularly a public one on the mouth, could sometimes be interpreted as an informal betrothal, even without explicit verbal vows. This created situations where individuals might inadvertently enter into a binding agreement, highlighting the power of non-verbal communication in a time when formal contracts were less accessible to many. This ambiguity underscores the complexities of navigating intimacy within a rigid social and religious framework. You might observe a young man, emboldened by shared laughter at a feast, subtly lean in to press a quick, chaste kiss on the hand of a maiden he admires, her slight blush and shy smile confirming his hopes. Or perhaps, in a more private setting, a couple deeply in love, but not yet formally betrothed, might exchange a tender mouth kiss, understanding its unspoken weight as a promise of their future together. For them, it was a moment of profound connection, a silent affirmation of their bond in a world where direct declarations of love were often reserved for poetry. From the subtle intricacies of medieval kissing, you now arrive at the culmination of the courtship journey, albeit with its own set of peculiar traditions, post-wedding night rituals. For a newly married couple in the Middle Ages, the wedding celebration didn't end with the vows. It often continued with a series of public and private customs designed to ensure consummation, confirm the legitimacy of the union, and bless the future fertility of the couple. It's a rather intrusive historical fact that the wedding night was often a communal affair, or at least publicly acknowledged, with specific rituals aimed at ensuring and, in some cases, verifying the consummation of the marriage. Imagine the newly married couple, not retreating for a private, intimate evening, but often being publicly escorted to their bedchamber by family and friends, sometimes with much fanfare, singing, and bawdy jokes. This was known as the bedding ceremony, or bedding of the bride. The purpose was twofold: to witness the couple entering their marital bed, thereby confirming the marriage had indeed begun, and to offer blessings for their fertility. It sounds less like a romantic finale, and more like a very awkward performance with a live audience. You can almost feel the bride's intense embarrassment as her relatives loudly cheer her into the chamber. A particularly bizarre, and perhaps uncomfortable, aspect was the tradition in some regions of checking for proof of consummation the morning after. While not universally practiced, some customs involved family members or trusted witnesses inspecting the bedsheets for signs of a virgin bride's defloration. This was seen as undeniable proof that the marriage had been consummated and was therefore legally and religiously binding. In cases where no such proof was found, it could lead to serious questions about the validity of the marriage, or even accusations of impotence or witchcraft. Imagine waking up on your wedding morning, not to breakfast in bed, but to a committee of relatives examining your linens. It puts a whole new meaning to sleep tight, doesn't it? Scholarly discussion frequently addresses the motivations behind these intrusive post-wedding rituals. Were they primarily about ensuring legal legitimacy and preventing annulment disputes, or were they also about upholding patriarchal control over female virginity and sexuality? The debate often centers on the regional variations and the extent to which these practices were widely enforced versus being more symbolic gestures. While the Church emphasized consent, societal norms often placed immense pressure on wives to prove their fertility and obedience. This complex interplay of legal, social, and religious expectations reveals the intense scrutiny surrounding the marital union. You might envision the couple, weary but perhaps relieved, finally alone in their chamber after the last guest has departed, the door symbolically closed. Yet, Even in this private space, the weight of expectation lingered. The act of consummation was not just a personal one, it was a societal imperative, crucial for the continuation of lineage and the legitimacy of the union in the eyes of the community and the church. For the bride, the wedding night often represented a profound transition from maidenhood to womanhood, marked by both vulnerability and the assumption of new responsibilities. These post-wedding night rituals, though seemingly anachronistic to modern eyes, underscore the profound importance of marriage in medieval society. It was not merely a personal bond, but a foundational pillar of community, economy, and spiritual order. Every step, from initial courtship to the intimate details of the wedding night, was imbued with significance, carefully managed to ensure the continuity of family lines and the stability of the social fabric. It's a powerful reminder that medieval love, for all its occasional moments of genuine romance, was always, ultimately, a public and profoundly practical affair. You have journeyed deep into the peculiar heart of medieval courtship, from the bizarre charms and coded signals to the public spectacles and intimate rituals. As the echoes of those distant times begin to fade, allow your mind to gently detach from the anxieties of dowries, the scrutiny of matchmakers, and the curious customs of the featherbed. Let the images soften, the sounds quiet. No more worries about love potions or suspicious linen inspections. The pressures of finding a suitable match in a world governed by superstition and strict social rules are now far behind you. Just the quiet hum of your own space, the gentle darkness embracing you. Feel the tension slowly release from your body, as if shedding the heavy medieval garb you've metaphorically worn. Your mind is calm, settled, filled with fascinating tales of a time long past. There is nothing left to decipher, nothing to interpret, no more omens to read, just the peaceful rhythm of your breath. The medieval world recedes, leaving you safe and sound in your own bed, in your own time. Let the strange and wonderful details of history lull you into a deep, restful sleep. You've navigated the oddest corners of the past, and now it's time for quiet, sweet dreams.